Elias Vance stood before the skeletal remains of the shack, the wind whipping a mournful tune through its broken ribs. To anyone else, it was a dollar's worth of rot and regret, a final, pathetic monument to a life hollowed out by loss. But his German shepherd, Kaiser, saw something different. The dog ignored the splintered porch and shattered windows, his body rigid, his gaze fixed on a single spot of dead earth near the foundation, a place he pawed at with a strange, obsessive desperation. Elias didn't know it yet, but Kaiser wasn't just digging at dirt. He was clawing at the edges of a secret worth $200 million, a truth buried deep enough to get them both killed, and a story of betrayal that was inextricably tied to the very day Elias's world had ended. We're honored to bring you stories that matter. If you believe in the power of loyalty and redemption, please support us by subscribing to our channel. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from today. We love hearing from our community around the world. The silence was the worst part. It wasn't the quiet of peace, but the roaring vacuum left by a voice he would never hear again. Liam. The name was a shard of glass in his throat. For 5 years since that day in the valley, Elias had lived in that vacuum, drifting through a world that had lost its color. He'd bought the 1-acre plot with the derelict shack for $1 at a county auction, a transaction that felt like a grim joke. It was a place to rust, to let the weeds grow over him just as they were strangling the house. He'd sit on the tailgate of his truck, a bottle in his hand, and stare at the ruin, seeing a perfect reflection of himself. But Kaiser wouldn't allow it. The dog, Liam's last gift to him, was a constant, warm pressure against his side. When the despair grew too thick, Kaiser would nudge the bottle from his hand, whining softly, his amber eyes filled with an understanding that defied logic. And he was obsessed with the shack. Every day, he would lead Elias to the same spot by the crumbling stone foundation and dig, a low, insistent growl in his chest, as if trying to show him something vital. It was a mission, and the dog was determined to make it Elias's, too. One afternoon, tired of fighting the inevitable, Elias grabbed a shovel. If nothing else, the work would keep the ghosts at bay. The shovel striking something solid was the first sound to break the monotony of grief. It wasn't a rock. It was a flat, slate slab unnaturally smooth. Kaiser barked, a sharp, triumphant sound, his tail a metronome of excitement. Elias knelt, his calloused hands brushing away decades of packed earth. The slab was heavy, but his military training had left his body a well-maintained machine, even if his spirit was broken. He leveraged the shovel beneath one edge and heaved. With a groan of protest, the stone lifted, revealing a dark, square cavity. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small tin box, its surface pitted with rust. A knot of unease tightened in Elias's stomach. This wasn't some forgotten root cellar. This was deliberate. He carried the box back to his truck, Kaiser trotting at his heels, a furry shadow of approval. He worked the rusted latch open with his knife. The contents were simple. A leather-bound journal, a small, tarnished silver key, and a single faded photograph of a man with kind eyes and a woman with a gentle smile, standing proudly in front of the shack when it was new and full of life. Elias opened the journal. The ink was faded, the script elegant. "My name is Arthur Finch," it began. "I built this home with my own hands for my love, Eleanor. If you are reading this, it means the world has gone dark, and I have failed to protect what matters most." Elias spent the next 3 days consumed by Arthur's story. He was a clockmaker, a man of precision and quiet principles who had been drafted into the war as a cryptographer. The journal was filled not with battle stories, but with love letters to Eleanor and complex, coded passages. Elias's own training in signals intelligence, a skill he thought he'd buried along with Liam, came rushing back. The familiar patterns, the ciphers hidden within mundane prose, it was a language he understood. He sat for hours at his small camp table, a pencil and paper his only tools, the silence of the woods his only companion. The coded sections spoke of a project, something vital to the war effort that Arthur had been tasked with safeguarding. He wrote of a superior officer, a man named Sterling, whose ambition felt dangerous, whose questions were always probing the edges of protocol. The final coded entry was chilling. Sterling knows. He suspects what I carry. I cannot trust him. I have hidden the heart of the matter where only a mind of patience can find it. The key is not the lock. The clock is the key. Tell Eleanor the sundial remembers noon. It was a puzzle. Elias looked at the small, tarnished key from the box. Then his eyes drifted to the shack. The mission had just begun. The work became his therapy. Elias wasn't just fixing a house. He was rebuilding a life, one plank, one nail at a time. He started with the foundation, clearing the debris from where Kaiser had first dug, repointing the stones with a craftsman's care he didn't know he possessed. He replaced the rotten floor joists, the scent of fresh-cut pine filling the air, chasing away the smell of decay. With every swing of the hammer, a piece of the anger and guilt chipped away. He found the sundial Arthur had mentioned, not a real one, but a faint carving on the stone mantelpiece of the fireplace, its gnomon pointing to a single loose brick. Behind it was a small keyhole. The silver key from the box slid in perfectly. It didn't open a door, but released a hidden spring mechanism. A section of the hearthstone sank into the floor, revealing a steep, narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. Kaiser whined, pressing against Elias's leg, a silent question. "It's okay, boy," Elias murmured, his voice rough from disuse. "We're in this together." The tunnel was cold and smelled of damp earth and time. It led to a small, dry chamber, and in its center a heavy, iron safe. The lock was a complex, multi-dial mechanism of Arthur's own design. The clockmaker's final puzzle. As Elias worked on the house, he also worked on the safe, his mind sharp and focused for the first time in years. He even started talking to the folks at the local hardware store, the first real human contact he'd initiated since the funeral. A quiet woman named Sarah who ran the counter would ask about his project, her smile genuine. Life was seeping back in. He was halfway through installing new windows when the sleek black car crunched up his gravel drive. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, his smile as polished and artificial as his shoes. "Mr. Vance?" he asked, extending a hand Elias didn't take. "My name is Silas Thorne. I represent a development corporation that's been acquiring land in this area." Thorne's eyes swept over the half-restored shack with a dismissive air, but Elias, trained to read men, saw a flicker of something else in his gaze. A sharp, predatory hunger. "I'll be frank," Thorne continued, his tone condescending. "This property is an eyesore, but we're prepared to make you a generous offer to take it off your hands. Say $50,000? More than fair for a pile of sticks." Kaiser, who had been sitting quietly on the porch, let out a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the floorboards. Elias put a calming hand on his dog's back. "It's not for sale," he said, his voice flat. Thorne's smile tightened. "Everyone has a price, Mr. Vance. 100,000. That's my final offer. Think about what a man like you could do with that kind of money." The implication was clear. "A broken man like you." "I said," Elias repeated, his gaze locking with Thorne's. "It's not for sale." Thorne's mask of civility dropped for a second. "You're making a mistake," he hissed, before turning and striding back to his car. Elias watched him go, a cold dread seeping into his bones. This wasn't about land. Thorne knew something. The threats started a week later. First, his supplies from the hardware store were sabotaged. A delivery of lumber dumped and splintered at the end of his drive. Then came the late-night visits. Headlights would sweep across the property, engines idling just beyond the tree line before speeding off into the darkness. Elias's combat instincts, long dormant, snapped back to life. He began sleeping in shifts, Kaiser a silent, alert sentinel at his side. He set up a perimeter, simple tripwires connected to cans that would alert him to any intrusion. One morning, he found one of the wires cut, and pinned to his front door with a knife was a photograph. It was a recent picture of Sarah from the hardware store, taken from a distance without her knowledge. Below it, scrawled in red ink, were two words, "Stay away." The message was a direct, personal assault. Thorne wasn't just threatening him. He was threatening the fragile new connections he was building, the very possibility of a life beyond the shack. The anger that rose in him was cold and clear, a familiar feeling he hadn't experienced since the service. This was no longer a property dispute. This was a battle. He went back down into the chamber to the safe. He knew the answer had to be inside. The numbers, the combination, Arthur's journal had to hold the final clue. He worked with a new, fierce urgency, the threat breathing down his neck. The final clue was hidden in a poem about Eleanor. The number of letters in each word corresponded to a number on the dial. 1 turn right, for left, 6 right. Elias's fingers, steady despite the adrenaline, spun the dials. The tumblers clicked, one by one, a symphony of release. With a heavy thud, the iron door swung open. Inside was not gold or jewels, but a collection of military files and a thick ledger. Elias pulled them out, his hands trembling slightly. The files detailed a World War II operation involving the theft of a massive shipment of Nazi gold, orchestrated not by the enemy, but by a corrupt American officer. The officer had murdered his entire unit to cover his tracks, faking a report that they were killed in an ambush. The name on the file made Elias's blood run cold. Captain Sterling. The ledger contained the details of how that gold was laundered over decades, creating a vast, illicit fortune. It traced the money through shell corporations, all leading to one entity, Thorn Development. And then he saw it, a more recent file, tucked at the bottom. It was a classified after-action report from his own unit's final mission. It detailed a botched op, where Liam had supposedly made a fatal error, leading to his death and the destruction of a valuable asset. The report was signed by the commanding officer who had ordered them into that valley, the man who had written Liam off as a mistake. His name was Silas Thorn, the grandson of Captain Sterling. It wasn't an error. It was an execution. Liam had discovered Thorn was using his position to run a modern-day version of his grandfather's smuggling operation. They hadn't walked into a trap. They had been sent to their deaths. The shack, the gold, Liam, it was all one story. And Thorn was its villain. Grief and rage warred within him, a storm that threatened to tear him apart. He could take the evidence to the authorities. But Thorn was powerful, his corruption deep-rooted. He'd bury the evidence, bury Elias with it, and walk away clean, just as his grandfather had. Justice for Liam couldn't be left to chance. He would not fail his friend again. Elias made his choice. He would face Thorn here on this ground, in the house he had rebuilt from nothing. This place was no longer a refuge. It was a fortress. His military mind took over, seeing the shack not as a home, but as a tactical environment. He spent the next 48 hours preparing. He used his knowledge of the structure, the secret tunnel, the very land itself. He rigged the new floorboards in the main room to collapse with the pull of a single, hidden lever. He created a secondary exit from the tunnel that came up behind the old woodshed. He set up a series of distractions, using a simple car battery and some wiring to create sounds that would draw an intruder to specific, vulnerable points. He was no longer just a carpenter. He was a soldier preparing his battlefield. He sat on the porch as dusk fell, the ledger and files safely rehidden. He cleaned Liam's old service pistol, the movements precise and automatic. Kaiser rested his head on Elias's knee, a silent promise of support. "He's coming for this boy," Elias whispered, stroking the dog's powerful neck. "And we're going to be ready." Thorn didn't come alone. 2 hired thugs, large and menacing, moved with him through the darkness, their confidence born of arrogance. They kicked in the front door, expecting to find a scared, broken veteran. Instead, they found an empty room. "Search the place," Thorn ordered, his voice echoing in the small house. "Find the ledger." As his men split up, Elias triggered the first distraction, the sound of a falling crate from the back bedroom. When one of the thugs went to investigate, Elias emerged from the shadows of the hallway, a phantom of his former self. He moved with the deadly efficiency of a special operator, dispatching the man silently and quickly. The second thug heard the scuffle and rushed forward, straight into the trap. Elias pulled the lever. A 4-foot section of the floor gave way, and the man plunged into the shallow crawlspace below with a cry of pain and surprise that left only Thorn. He stood in the center of the room, his face a mask of fury, a pistol now in his hand. "Vance, you think you can hide from me? Your friend couldn't," he taunted. The words meant to break him, but they only hardened Elias's resolve. "This ends tonight." Elias's voice came from the direction of the fireplace. Thorn spun and fired, the bullet splintering the new mantelpiece. But Elias was already gone, having slipped down the stairs into the tunnel. Thorn, enraged, followed him down. In the claustrophobic confines of the stone chamber, the final confrontation took place. Thorn was ruthless, but Elias was on his own turf. They wrestled for the gun, a desperate, violent struggle. The pistol went off, the sound deafening in the small space, the bullet ricocheting off the stone wall. Elias felt a searing pain in his shoulder and fell back, the gun clattering to the floor. Thorn loomed over him, a triumphant sneer on his face as he reached for the weapon. Suddenly, a black and tan blur shot from the top of the stairs. Kaiser, who had been ordered to stay, had disobeyed. With a ferocious roar, he launched himself at Thorn, his loyalty overriding all commands. The dog's full weight slammed into the larger man, sending him crashing against the far wall. Before Thorn could recover, Kaiser had his arm clamped in his powerful jaws, shaking his head, refusing to let go. The fight was over. With Thorn and his men subdued, Elias made the call. When the state police arrived, they found Thorn incapacitated, 2 henchmen neutralized, and a mountain of evidence detailing 70 years of corruption, theft, and murder all laid out on Arthur Finch's workbench. Thorn's empire crumbled overnight. The story of the decorated war hero and the corrupt officer became national news. The recovered gold, valued at nearly $200 million, was repatriated. As a reward for its discovery, a significant portion was granted to Elias. He didn't keep a penny for himself. He used the money to establish the Liam Patterson Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting the families of soldiers who had lost their lives not to the enemy, but to the failings of their own command. He bought the hardware store for Sarah, ensuring her future. He finished the shack, transforming it from a ruin into a warm, beautiful home. It stood not as a monument to loss, but as a testament to healing. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Elias would sit on the porch, the journal of Arthur Finch in his lap. He would watch the sunset paint the sky, Kaiser's head resting faithfully on his knee. The silence was different now. It was the quiet of peace, the earned quiet of a man who had faced the ghosts of his past and built a future worthy of the friend he had lost. This story is a tribute to the unwavering loyalty that can pull us from our darkest moments and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild a life. The bond between a man and his dog is one of life's most profound gifts, a silent promise that you are never truly alone. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, we would be so grateful if you would like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. And please, tell us in the comments about a loyal companion who changed your life. We read every one. We'll see you in the next video.